Hi folks, it's John Eisen from lastchanceaurorestore.com, and this week's tip pertains to the rear axle nut of Volkswagen Bugs or Beetles. One of the most common things that I see is people are not being able to take this rear axle nut off. A couple of main reasons for it. Number one is the torque spec on it is amazing. It's 207 foot-pounds of torque, and you can imagine over time and corrosion that is a really hard nut to loosen up and get off. So I've got some tips on a very easy way for this to come off in your house or in your driveway or in your shop. So the first thing I did is obviously I removed the wheel. Once you remove the wheel, as we all know, there's a large cotter pin that comes through here and locks in place. So to save on time, I've already removed this cotter pin. And then what we're going to do, first of all, we need to lock or hold the rear drum in place. And this is torqued on so hard that if your Beetle is down on the ground and you try to move this nut, you'll actually roll the car, even with your parking brake on and in gear, because 207 foot-pounds to this nut is an amazing amount of torque. So what I've done is I have an old piece of angle iron, and this is from an old bed, believe it or not. And what I've done is I've marked and drilled 2 holes so that the nuts for the drum will fit through here. And you'll notice that I've reinforced it. We've had this for quite some time. You can see there's some bends in it, and we've reinforced it with some extra welds. So the easiest thing to do is to get a piece of angle iron, hold it up to the 2 bottom patterns, and mark it and drill holes so that the lug nuts will fit through. So what we're going to do now is basically just line this up, because what we want to do is we want to be able to support the drum and the rear axle from moving when we go to torque on the axle nut itself. So it's just going to take me a second here to thread this bolt. And I use a 3/4 inch socket for these. I'm sure there's metric, I can't remember what the metric number is, but a 3/4 socket works perfect for it. So as you can see, I just started both of the bolts, and then we just line this up so that this angle iron is up against the floor, and then I'm just going to simply give this a little bit of a tighten onto the drum. And then once we tighten this down, this angle iron has all the support and it takes a lot of the weight, obviously, because it's up against the floor. Now, if you're doing this in your driveway and you don't want to mark your asphalt or your driveway, what I recommend is just getting a block of wood and putting it between this beam so that you don't mark the actual floor. Now, in this case, our workshop floor has got some marks in it, so we're all right there. Okay, so you can see I've got this all bolted in. So now what we do is the axle nut size for a Beetle is 36 millimeters, and it's a 3/4 inch drive, and I have a 3-foot wrecking bar. So what we do is we set this on, and then as I go to pull up on this, the force or the weight of this axle is going to go onto this bar here, and we're gonna just see. And there she starts to go. So, believe it or not, that's 207 foot-pounds of torque from the factory. And it's an important spec that you do need to, when we're done here, we have to tighten that back up to the same thing. Once again, 207 foot-pounds of torque. So, that loosens it up. Just want to make sure that we get enough of the pressure off. So now what I can do is remove it from the wrecking bar. I have an adapter that goes from 3/4 to half, and then I can use my 3/4 drive. And then what we're going to do is remove the nut the rest of the way. And by doing this, we can then examine the rear brakes. We can adjust the brakes. Most people adjust the brakes from the back, but if your wheel cylinder is leaking, or if the brakes are a little bit spongy, chances are it's the rear wheel cylinder. And I would say that for every 10 Volkswagen Beetles that we restore, 9 of 10 will have a problem with these rear brakes, and it's really hard to get these nuts off, and I think it's just neglect over time, first of all, to have the socket, but then most impact wrenches won't even take it off. So by having this angle iron support, it makes it a lot easier. So now all I'm doing is just taking these lug nuts off, obviously. And then this drum should just slide right off, and it will give us access to the rear axle seal, the shoes, and we can do an inspection. Okay, so we get our angle iron out of the way. So now this drum should just work its way loose here. And here she comes. And there we are. So now we can do a complete inspection. We can work on the rear brakes and do everything we need to do. Once we're done with this, we slide the drum obviously back on, and then we'll put our big axle nut back on again, and then we'll use our torque wrench, and then we'll put our angle iron back on, only we'll put it on this direction, and when we go to tighten, obviously we're going to be going towards the back. So that's my tip of the day. That's John Eisman from LastChanceAutorestore.com.